Really nice to see a nice, cosy, perfectly formed group after having a large group of, I think we had 40 odd yesterday in the first one. So this is going to be a nice kind of more intimate setting, I think. I thought I'd start just by getting your mind in the right kind of place, as it were, by asking you just to think about what your organisation does that you feel is a really good example of how it's investing in volunteers. Just pop that in the chat and just see what comes up through that. That would be just really interesting. So just a few words, don't think you need to write a whole load of text, just a few words that you feel illustrates how your organisation is investing in volunteers. There's always a little pause while people are trying to get this point. Great. So training in different aspects of inclusivity, yeah. Provide opportunities, but volunteers having the choice, yeah, absolutely. It's kind of at the heart of volunteering, isn't it? Induction, thank yous, training. So that's great. That follows the kind of life cycle of the volunteer, doesn't it? Training opportunities to learn. Yeah. Volunteer engagement, social events, inputting ideas into volunteer programs, social stuff. Yeah. Brilliant. So quite a range of things. Supporting those who manage and engage volunteers. That's really interesting. So yeah, it's not just about the kind of interface of the volunteer with the organisation, it's about that infrastructure, the personnel that you have in place to make that experience a good one and recognition there. Brilliant, so that's fantastic. So a real mix of things there from, as you say, that kind of infrastructure, investment in the support framework through to kind of things that you do with volunteers, social recognition events. Training comes up a lot there, which is absolutely very important. Okay, so I'm going to share just a few slides with you, but we are going to spend some time in a couple of little tiny breakout rooms it'll be today, just having a chat about, thinking about how you invest in volunteers in a bit more detail. But before we get onto that, I'll just share a couple of slides. So hopefully you can see that okay now. So just kind of really pinning down, what are the benefits of investing in volunteers? And there are so many, but some of the key ones, I think, from my perspective, are by making that investment, you're actually creating a sort of competent, confident workforce, in inverted commas, of volunteers who can really make a significant difference in the organisation through the contribution of not just their time, but their skills and experience. So that investment really helps you kind of maximise on that. Also, it's important to remember that if you give volunteers a good experience, they become loyal and enthusiastic, knowledgeable brand ambassadors for you. So, you couldn't have that many paid staff going out into the community saying great things about your organisation. So they really are an important key part of that. So, that really underlines the importance of giving them good experience. They also should be seen as part of a kind of really thorough EDI and inclusion agenda. So they really, if you've got a diverse group of volunteers, they are connected out in their own communities. So can really contribute to that kind of widening engagement agenda. And I don't just mean around volunteering, I mean about bringing people into your attractions and your museums and your sites so that they're really good at part of your overall organisation's EDI strategy and policy. And of course, they are people with connections and part of networks, so they're fantastic at kind of exerting influence and possibly even making introductions between, the organisation and key people that it might be important to kind of have a seat at the table with. So I say lots of reasons why it's important to invest in volunteers. And I don't know if any of you saw this piece that was on LinkedIn a month or so ago. I just thought it summed things up really well. So it talks about the fact that the success of involving volunteers in your work depends on the time, structure and direction they receive from staff. And that when an organisation invests in training, what's called here mentorship, volunteers become this invaluable asset, real partners that help you expand so that you can accomplish much more and bring knowledge that you might not have within the staff team. But why I like this quote is because it's the second half of it, really. It's that without that investment, however, they can become a bit of a burden. They need constant kind of looking after and directing, and they can, really interrupt workflow. So I think, yes, it's great recognizing the amazing things they can be, but it's worth kind of reflecting on if you don't invest in them well, the cost of that could actually be quite significant. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about investing in volunteers, the thing, if you like, the investing in volunteers standard. And those of you who are around for Sandra Adair's input at the very beginning of yesterday morning will recognise some of this. So as she said, it's known as the industry standard around volunteer involvement. So it applies to any organisation of any size, any structure, working in any sector, any context where volunteers are involved. It covers all 4 UK nations and the Republic of Ireland and is governed by something called UKVF, which is the UK Volunteering Forum. Been around quite a while now, since the mid 1990s, and was reviewed in really refreshed in 2021, to reflect the findings of Time Well Spent, which you may have heard of, a very big piece of research carried out by NCVO that drilled down into what are volunteers looking for from their experience, what makes a good experience, what puts people off volunteering. So it was really important to kind of build that into the new version of the Investing Volunteers Standard. So if you remember nothing else about this little bit, it's this last bullet point that's important to remember. Basically, all investing in volunteers is a set of 29 statements that describe best practice in working with volunteers. And those 29 statements are derived from the volunteer involvement sector, if you like. So they've been put together by organisations who work with volunteers. And they are freely available. Anyone can go to the website, download them, use them to structure your work or do a health check around how you're working with volunteers. And indeed, there will be a copy in the electronic tote bag that you get for attending the conference as well. So you don't even need to go and look for it online. It'll be there in that tote bag. So just a final slide for me, just to explore those 29 statements in a bit more detail. So helpfully, they're categorized into what are called quality areas, and there are 6 quality areas. So I'm just going to go through those rather than all 29 statements. So the first quality area is all about vision for volunteering. And that's really about really understanding why it is you involve volunteers. What's the intention? How are they helping you deliver on your mission and vision? So really being clear about what the role of volunteers in that is. And then also sitting alongside that, reflecting on whether you're achieving that. So are volunteers having the impact that you intend them to have in terms of delivering your vision and mission? So it's all about that kind of top level thinking. What's it all about? Why? Basically, why? Um, then quality area 2 is all of the stuff you do around planning to involve volunteers. So this is all the people, the policies, the procedures, all of that kind of internal infrastructure stuff you have in place that makes sure that volunteering is going to be effective and managed efficiently. So that's all the kind of what I call the backroom stuff, everything you kind of ought to have in place to make it all happen well. And then quality area 3 is the work that you do around inclusion. So it's that kind of proactive approach to reaching out to people and engaging them, interesting them in coming into your organisation. What are you doing that's going to attract as wide a group of people as possible to want to come and spend some time with you as volunteers? Then quality area 4 is the whole onboarding piece. So it's, how do you recruit volunteers? What sort of checking and vetting do you do? How do you provide an induction? How do you make sure they've got everything they need in place to be well prepared for their role? And then 5 is how you support volunteers. So it's all about volunteers feeling that communications, two-way communication is good. They feel consulted. They feel part of the team. They've got a named go-to person. That they really feel very comfortable in their role and confident to carry out their volunteering. And then finally, quality area 6 is all about valuing and developing volunteers. So it's a lot of the stuff that came up in the chat there. So the recognition, opportunities to undertake training, move into different roles, connect with other volunteers. And just that simple, how are you thanking volunteers? How are you acknowledging the time and contribution that they make? So those is a very quick whistle-stop tour of the 6 quality areas. As I said, those 29 statements that sit under the 6 quality areas, freely available. But for those organisations who want to, there is also that opportunity to go through the accreditation process, which is a kind of external person coming in and just working with you to check that all of your ducks are in a row, if you like, in relation to the standard. And I'm going to hand over to Sheila in a sec because she's going to talk to you about the experience of going through that accreditation process. But just to say, I've been working with Sheila for probably as long as, yeah, as long as you've been with Reading Museum Partnership, isn't it, Sheila? But also just to say that the museum partnership in various guises has held the accreditation for a long time, since about 2011. So I've been working with the standard for a really long time. So yeah, I'll hand over to you now, Sheila.
Thank you very much, Janet. So yeah, so I'm here to explain some of the benefits of using IIV as a framework. I really do see it as the bedrock of our volunteer engagement. In fact, I've been quoted as saying so on the IIV website, so look out for that quote. The process of achieving accreditation both reassures you as the leader of the volunteering programme and enhances volunteer satisfaction. So yes, as Janet says, we've been working for at least 7 years for me personally, and the assessment process really is rewarding. Working through the quality areas ensures that you prioritise best practice, helping you tighten up your policies and procedures. For example, we have a problem-solving policy that is required by the standard, and we use that policy several times a year. I highlight the policy at the volunteers induction and then particularly emphasise the importance of upholding our inclusive values. The introduction of Quality Area 6 that Janet just mentioned was a few years ago, and that encouraged us to be more aspirational about ongoing development. We were asked, how we make space for the volunteer voice to be heard, which reminded us the importance of consulting volunteers, involving them through focus groups and also piloting new roles. Hearing from volunteers also helps you go beyond the basics, such as co-designing those new roles that help keep volunteers motivated, which in turn can lead to progression, and that can lead to loyalty. The assessor acts as a critical friend, but I hope you can see that Janet is far from critical. And we know that being a volunteer coordinator can feel like a lone wolf. It's one of the reasons why we have these regional networks through HVG, which if you're not a member of, please do look into. So Janet is a supportive mentor, and I see her rather like a consultant to help you improve your volunteer engagement. IIV raises the profile of volunteering both internally and externally. The assessor asks the volunteers what it's like to be part of the organisation. Like the main body of interviews are with a percentage, a representative sample of the volunteers, and they enjoy being asked their views and sharing. And the accreditation is based primarily on those replies given in the interviews. I want to say very loud and clear, they are not looking for 5 lever arch files full of policies. You'll be asked for a sample of 2, is that right, Janet? Two of your maybe your volunteer policy and a handbook or something like that. Okay, so it's not a whole lot of paperwork. Your assessor will check in with the volunteer manager or coordinator, the senior managers in your organisation, and a sample of supervisors. And I feel this reminds colleagues of the importance of following best practice. I mean, at least every 3 years, but of course we do have an annual review as well. You can use the logo on your materials as well, which is reassuring to funders. So here's some, yes, I'm going to briefly share some successes from our volunteer engagement at Museums Partnership Reading. We strive to maintain a highly satisfied cohort of volunteers. So you can see on this pie chart that in our annual survey, satisfaction survey, 91% of our volunteers rated us 8, 9, 10 out of 10. And actually 59% of those were 10 out of 10. So really proud of those stats. And we wrote a blog about analysing what we think was behind that back in 2022. Yeah, so here's a few of our volunteers. We've got a lovely garden at the Museum of English Rural Life. So we have a summer party and a Christmas gathering. Through the interviews with IIV, we heard just how important connecting with others is to so many of our volunteers. We make sure we provide opportunities to connect and hear the volunteer voice so it informs our wider work. This is a focus group that was helping to inform a change to our interactive table game in one of our galleries. There was lots of input that helped shape that. The process also reminds us just how important variety is to so many volunteers. Our volunteers carry out over 30 different activities with our museums and special collections across the two museums. Behind the scenes roles are hotly contested, and volunteers are willing to wait for these opportunities. We pilot new roles with existing volunteers and then open them up to all comers. Using Better Impact, the volunteer management software, means we can easily promote one-off activities and tasks, and these appeal to existing volunteers, offering connection and variety across the museums. Meanwhile, the platform offers equity of opportunity for all to apply for new roles. We're able to download Excel spreadsheets where we can anonymize the applicant's name, take the applicant's name off, just hide those columns, which then means we're anonymously shortlisting where there's more volunteers apply for the role. And then this ensures that a mix of newcomers and existing volunteers are appointed. So all the methods I've just referred to above just ultimately lead to good volunteer retention. We're part of the University of Reading is the MOL. So here's some volunteers receiving appreciation awards at the University of Reading's Volunteer Appreciation Gala. So the IIV process is not just every 3 years. Janet and I also have an annual catch up. And this gives me the opportunity to reflect on our strengths and continue to strive for excellence. So in summary, you can use the framework as a tool to benchmark your volunteer engagement, even if you don't have the budget. But if you can, do go for it and enjoy that mutually beneficial process. Why not consider building IIV into your next funding bid? That's just what we've done before. As I've mentioned, the accreditation will reassure funders, and often the funders' values align with IIV quality areas. So be bold. Having a third party assess you and make a few recommendations could improve your offer, leading to greater volunteer satisfaction, connection, and commitment. So thank you very much. I'm really sorry, Janet. I think you're on mute.
I was just thanking you, Sheila. That's brilliant. So yeah, if you've got any questions about anything that Sheila or I've said, please do pop them in the chat and we'll come back to them at the space we've left for Q&A at the end. But we're going to do a breakout room exercise now. So I'll just bring up a slide to kind of explain what we'd like you to do in the... So if those who are in group one remember who you were, did the pair who were in group one remember they were group one?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, so group one, do you want to just share a little bit about what came up in your discussion in your group?
I'm going to let Emma do most of the talking because the simple reason being, as I'm not now working because I was made redundant earlier in the year, Emma's obviously got much more real-time experience, whereas mine's very old,
Yeah.
past experience, although I can share it as well. But Emma had some great things that she was telling me about her museum. Fascinated. I think we're all going to have to come for a visit.
Yeah, so I was kind of thinking about the vision for volunteering.
Yeah.
I think there's some things that we're doing well and some things that really need some development. So
Yeah.
I think what we're doing well is involving volunteers. We have a focus group. We do regular surveys. The focus group then reviews the surveys and feeds back
Yeah.
ideas and suggestions. But they're also available. They run drop-in sessions. So if a volunteer
yeah.
doesn't feel comfortable coming to talk to us, they can go and talk to a member of the
Yeah.
focus group who will then feed that back anonymously.
Brilliant.
So in terms of like the engagement side of things, I think we're engaging well. getting their input.
Yeah.
We've got lots of different roles. We've got about 20 different roles. And I was just saying, I think that volunteers are really valued at board level and by the trustees. And I think their impact is understood. But I think there's a lot of work for me to do to kind of communicate that to management level within the organisation. Historically, the volunteers were always theatre ushers and they'd check tickets and show people to their seats. But we've diversified now and they're doing so many different things. They're working on programs with young people, they're working on festivals, they're supporting people with learning disabilities. And I don't think that was always seen. I think it's difficult to get that across, but it's also difficult to get the perception is that all volunteers will be retired, it'll be a post-retirement activity, and actually that's changing. We're bringing in younger people. So I suppose it's bringing all the managers on that journey with us and showing that things are going in a different direction. And I think if we were to do investing in volunteers, I think that would really help to show that we to bring them with us on that journey, I suppose.
Absolutely. No, that's really interesting. So amazing stuff around your volunteer voice. That's really very impressive. So that's great, that there is that conduit for volunteers to express their views and comment and give feedback. But as you say, it's not unusual, I guess, because volunteering is quite a specialism, isn't it? And if you live and breathe it, because that's your job, you're obviously passionate about it, all the different nuances and everything that's going on. But as you say, it's that kind of wider awareness in the organisation. That's often a challenge, I would say, for quite a high proportion of the organisations I've worked with. That's a thing for them, just getting that more understood. And that's where, as you say, just using investing in volunteers, but also stuff like the sort of social return on investment and sort of quantifying the hours that volunteers give and all of that kind of thing can make a huge difference. That's brilliant. Thank you for that, Emma. That's really interesting. Very impressed with the volunteer voice stuff. That's excellent. Excellent. Okay, what about the other pair? Anything you want to feedback from your discussion? That was Helen and Michelle, wasn't it?
I mean, we talked about it's interesting how that whole culture piece. So actually embedding volunteers. So if you are a gardener and you have volunteers, you're not just thinking about your role as a gardener. You're thinking about your role in supporting volunteers. And Helen will come in on her forestry people. So
I mean, our challenge, we're an England wide element, and just as everybody said, where we've got them really embedded in volunteering, it's great, but a high proportion of our staff, it is an element of their role. And they may be a forester, they may be an ecologist, they may be our heritage individuals, and how we engage them to that whole support. And they're often not line managing. So their experience in line managing, supporting, understanding those complexities are often not there. So it's how we support them in that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I having been doing this for so many years, I do find it is the larger national organisations who not struggle, that's the wrong word, but have more to do around that kind of thing. It's easy, isn't it, if you've just got like 3 staff and everybody's pulling in the same direction and everybody's totally invested in their volunteers. But bigger organisations, it is getting that kind of running out like tendrils through the whole organisation is challenging. But as Emma was saying from the last group, using the investing in volunteers as a vehicle for that can be really helpful. Yeah, Sheila, you wanted to add on something to that one?
Yeah, it's just thinking about that because a few years ago we took the decision to try to, as part of a new member of staff's induction, we would spend half an hour with that person and just get that chance to pitch volunteering in the corner. And often for younger people, early career people, it is really important to get supervisory experience, isn't it? So actually we try to emphasize that. They say that if you hadn't considered working with volunteers, please remember that it's a chance to try out your supervisory skills so that when you do eventually take on a direct report, you've got that experience. And asking someone to do something when they're more senior to you sometimes can be a bit of a challenge for some people. But of course, once they do it and realize that people are really willing, it gives them good confidence. So do you find that too?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm also a big fan of kind of vox pop facts and figures as well. So it's kind of like this wouldn't happen if it wasn't for volunteers, or this would cost that much if we had to pay someone to do it, or those kind of just blurbs that kind of really shout at you. I think are really very powerful. That's fantastic. Vanessa, did you want to just say something?
Yeah, I think you just almost said it, Janet. I think we probably were on the same wavelength there about the fact of all those stats and figures. It was something that Emma and I were talking about. One of the things I've implemented IIV in a couple of organisations, and I've also done the reassessment as well. So, and one of the ones that I can remember so clearly was the fact that volunteers aren't just, as we said, numbers. They're not a case of they've done X number of hours times national minimum wage, and this is what they've saved the organisation, because that's a nonsense. But it's that whole interaction, is that how many visitors do they interact with? How many, we were just talking about, Emma was explaining, she doesn't mind me mentioning, about the fact the excitement of a dinosaur bone being put into a young person's hands, and how exciting that can be. Those are the things that become that much more tangible, but trying to then convey that to your board or your senior management in a large organization they don't see it as well. And you've got to go out there on the floor and you've got to see it, and you need to get your volunteers talking to you. So for me, the investing in volunteers, especially with the London Museum as it is now, was very much about having the volunteers engaged with the process, so that they felt that management suddenly was taking some interest in them. We did it the other way around. We just sort of suddenly said, this is our way of showing how much we want to hear what you have to say and contribute. And this way we have a standard that we can all follow and we can all support with each other as well. And the volunteers got on board with that as well. And we made some changes during our whole process as well, which was really good, but it got full support from all the volunteers. So that, where museums tend to get that very archaic, dusty perspective of older volunteers being, I'm not changing, I'm going to stay the way I am, suddenly they get a little bit enthusiastic and find that actually I do want to do this. It actually sounds really quite fun, because I'm going to have a voice into that, having those forums and engagement.
They really like the interviews.
They do like the interviews as well. And Sheila, you're right as well, that whole point about being able to help staff. I mean, I'm not being funny, but I always say to people, if you can manage staff, that doesn't mean you can manage volunteers, but if you can manage volunteers, you can probably manage anyone.
I would totally agree.
So the perspective of actually helping to bring people through that process, it can be so different and can add so much more value. But it is hard in the bigger national organisations. Like I said, London Museum, it was a case of, if we want to follow this mission view, then we need to bring our volunteers along with it. So this is an opportunity, but you need to give me some money to do it. Natural History Museum, as much as we tried to put it forward, because we needed to make some changes and everything else as well, it wasn't the priority. The priority was there was always something else going on that needed to happen as well. So it's sometimes hard if you don't have that voice on the board that actually is screaming about the fact that we need to acknowledge and recognise what volunteers are doing. And I think that's what most volunteer managers probably struggle with, if they are just one of a larger number of organisations and they're not seen to be as high profile as everyone else. And so it's trying to do what you can to raise that profile. But anyway, sorry, that was a bit more of a waffle than I expected.
And I was just to finish off on that, I was born in mind. I did a heritage sector organisation within the last few months, and one of the things they linked was visitor satisfaction with volunteering, because the volunteers were in the galleries and they were the people that the visitors had interacted with. So everything about the visitor satisfaction was to do with the volunteer interaction.
Absolutely.
Very powerful. So anyway, I'm going to just share a couple more slides before we run out of time, and then that'll lose it for a few minutes just for some quick questions. I'll just bring that up again. So I just wanted to very quickly whiz through the accreditation processes, if that is something people are interested in at some point in the future. So really important to say that it's a supported journey. My role as an assessor when I'm working with an organisation is to help them demonstrate how they meet the standard, and not kind of carry out an inspection as to whether they do or they don't. It's very much a work alongside. So it starts with an initial briefing. You then do a kind of internal self-assessment, health check, and then work with the assessor to kind of identify things that might need tweaking or improving or developing. And that's step 3, the improving practice phase. And that can be the best part of a year to work through that. And then you don't actually have the assessment, step 4, until you're ready, your assessor feels you're ready. So 99.9% of organisations that go through it are accredited, because you're simply not doing that assessment until that is going to be the case, basically. So it is very kind of supported journey. Yeah, and as I say, it's about your assessor helping you show how you meet the standard. Couple of links in here, and you'll get these slides, so you'll have all of these, so don't worry about that. But as I said, you can download the standard freely. It's going to be in your tote bag anyway. I think I mentioned there is this free kind of starting point, multi-choice self-assessment thing hosted by NCVO. So there's a link to that there. That's called IIV Essentials. If you're interested in going for the accreditation, obviously you've got to know how much it costs, and that is worked out on the basis of the number of volunteers you have, the number of roles, and the number of sites. So there's a little algorithm that does that. So there's a link to get a quote there. And then if you're curious or nosy about who's already been through the process, there is a full list of achievers on the IIV website as well. And just to finish off, if anyone is so interested they would like to think about accreditation, there is a discount attached to being at the conference of 10%, and that lasts for the next 6 months. So, if you go to that, get a quote page and use the HVG 25 under the section, how did you hear about IIV? That will get you that 10% discount. So that's that. I think we've got a few minutes, not many, but a few minutes for some questions. So I don't know if anyone's posted anything in the chat. I don't think they have as yet. So yeah, does anyone just want to shout them out if they have any questions, or stick your hand up if you don't like shouting things out?
I was just going to ask, I was telling Helen, in County Durham, the local volunteer centre, they created the County Durham Volunteering Kite Mark.
Yeah.
Are you aware of this?
Yeah, there are a few around the country that individual volunteer centres have developed. Yeah, I mean they are local.
Yeah. I mean, we've got that one,
Yeah.
and it was free.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
I think looking at what I reckon they follow some of the stuff anyway.
Yeah.
But it's interesting if people are. What I was going to say is if they're not sure about doing the whole hog of investing in volunteering, maybe that's a nice little step in.
Yeah.
And then they can sort of like practice that with the local one, and then maybe look at a bigger one. Because I think your point about funders, I think is a good one in terms of, or Sheila mentioned funders, in getting that accreditation. So yeah, just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, and yeah, you're right. There are quite a few local ones, and as you say, that they're fine, and perhaps some of it kind of has that concentric circle with investing in volunteers. So yes, whatever fits best, I guess. Yeah.
Also, like Janet said, just to reiterate about the fact that you can look through the standard and do a health check. You said, Janet, you said at the moment there is a tool on NCVO that's currently available that you can do to check, and it might just reassure you to think, gosh, we're 90% of the way there. Yeah. You get the whole year to work through it once you've decided to opt in.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I'm all for using the free resources. So yes, use that health check on the NCVO website and use the standard. Just take it and create your own checklist. Yeah.